Publishing began releasing a series of books called Images of America. This series preserves and shares the history of hundreds of individual communities throughout the country. One of the newest titles celebrates Oklahoma City's own Bricktown. It's almost a pocket guide to Bricktown's territorial boom days, its mid-20th century neglect, and then its vibrant rebirth. The book has lots of pictures, too, so you'll find it a fun Saturday afternoon read on the back porch. With me to take us on a stroll through Bricktown's past is the book's author and a friend of ours, Steve Lackmeyer. You absolutely are, to me, are Mr. Downtown Oklahoma City. I love to read your articles. You're so committed to downtown. So I really need to know the inside story of why it was so important to you to tell Bricktown's story.
Well, you know, Jack Money, who co-authored Oklahoma City second time around, our first book, and we detailed Bricktown and got into the story of what happened from like its earliest days in the 80s through, you know, modern day and how it became an entertainment district. But after it was all over, there was so much more to be told. I mean, it was just a fraction of the story. You know, everyone thinks it's just a bunch of old warehouses before Spaghetti Warehouse came in. No. This was a very vibrant area.
And I think if I read correctly, it was about 10 years after the land run that it came into being, right?
Yes. Well, originally the area was used by federal troops to keep law and order in those earliest days, well, relative to what we call law and order today. And when they left, the land was to be used for a park, a school, and industry, and the city did just that. You had what would be Douglas High School. You had Riverside Park. You'd have a lot of industry, a lot of rails. I mean, it was just circled by rail lines, 4 or 5 different train stations. And oh, by the way, I have a photo that shows what is now the Oklahoma River crossing Sheridan Avenue.
Really?
So the river came right through it.
Now, it was known then as the wholesale district, is that right?
Yes, all the wholesale druggists, the grocers, the lumber yards, and oh my, the cotton gin operations. I mean, they just dominated the area just, I'd say, south of Reno Avenue all the way to the river. They were massive at one time.
And there was the Iron Biscuit Company.
The I-10 Biscuit Company and collectors of antiques really seek out the old tins from that operation. It later was bought out by Nabisco. That building's now the U-Haul building.
One surprise that I had when I looked at the cover, I thought, oh, all these kids standing around.
Yes.
I had no idea there was an ice cream company down there. Steffens?
Yes, Steffens Ice Cream, and I purposely chose that cover to surprise folks, to get them off guard right off the bat. 1941, it held an open house offering free ice cream, and the kids responded. And I've got an advertisement for that as well, along with a couple of photos. A very big operation all the way through the 80s. The building's still standing. It's slated to be demolished soon for a Holiday Inn Express.
Oh, okay. Now, talk a little about the demise of Bricktown and then the rebirth.
Well, you know, the wholesale district thrived all the way through the Great Depression. They had teams from, you know, companies playing baseball. You had Douglas High School with Zelia Bro teaching some of the jazz greats like Charlie Christian and Jimmy Rushing. And then the Great Depression started wiping out some of the biggest anchors. Wholesalers like Carol Brown Robinson. And by the way, that ultimately became Fleming Foods.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but there are others that just totally disappeared. And it didn't kill the wholesale district, but certainly it lost its momentum coming out of the Great Depression. And we see some activity continuing through the 60s. Then urban renewal hits. And what people need to realize is what's now Bricktown really extended west of the tracks, approximately to where a little bit past where E.K. Gaylord runs now. That didn't even exist. Urban renewal wiped out everything that was west of the Santa Fe tracks. So you lost quite a bit there. Then you had industry slowly leaving for Santa Fe Avenue and 36th Street. And you end up in the 70s with an area that was almost forgotten.
And if it wasn't for visionaries,
yeah,
and we have a whole list of names,
yes,
we wouldn't be
quite
where we are today.
Quite a story. Neil Horton, Bill Peterson, and John Michael Williams. These three took a risk, and they're the ones who began Bricktown, 1979, 1980, and just horrible timing. Neil Horton ended up destitute, homeless for a little bit. It was a great idea, bad time.
Oil bust time.
Yeah, and then out of their bankruptcy and the ashes came in the likes of Don Karchmer, Jim Tolbert, and the legendary Jim Brewer, a larger-than-life figure.
Who just died recently.
Yes, he did, yes. Told a fascinating life story with the Oklahoman just over the summer before he died. Started up the Haunted Warehouse.
Right.
The others, kind of brought in some office activity. And before you knew it, Spaghetti Warehouse arrives in 1989, and
bingo.
Everything starts ablaze. And then MAPS was the steroid shot. I mean, it just
It's a good way to put it.
Everything just started bursting forth, and it's become the premier urban entertainment district for the region.
Absolutely.
So,
what do you see in its future? I mean, we have articles, many of them. You write a lot of them about some missteps along the way. Businesses that die and then new ones replace it.
We're seeing them in another transitional period. They're maturing. There was some juvenile activity going on with both property owners and merchants. They weren't very sophisticated at first. Now they're really stepping forward. They're being much more mature in their approach. They're really starting to take responsibility for their area's future. The hotels that are being built and opened up in their midst, that's going to have a huge impact.
So you see it on its way
It's going to continue to go up. The momentum's going to slow down just a little bit right now, just because of the national economy. But we're seeing more operation, clubs, restaurants, and shops opening up. I think they're going to have to decide whether or not they want more clubs. There's really a debate going on as to whether or not they can continue to have clubs in any kind of significant presence, and also move forward as a regional destination.
Well, Steve, we'll count on you to keep your finger on the pulse of downtown Oklahoma City. We're very glad that you wrote this book, and
Thank you.
It's a fascinating read. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you very much.